So, and now let's talk about synchronization framework specifics. And of course, we start here with the alternative name for target system tables. What's behind that? Please think about objects in the database like the UCI root or CMS root or UNS root B. You can add their entries of specific systems, and of course these are all generic things. So each generic entry here means another system or another specific name. And what was implemented there is that from now on it is possible to define alternative display names, which at the end allows to name these objects a little bit nicer so that user can understand what it is in difference to group 1, group 2 or something like that. In case of managing outstanding objects, we have some improvements as well. First of all, there is now a constraint check for delete, reset, or publish operations, in difference to that these things are just shown and you click on it and then there's an error message that says it's not possible because of XYZ. The constraint checks happens now before, and delete, publish, or reset will not be shown if this makes no sense. And in the part 2 of that specific slide, you see what we discussed before. There are as well enhancement outstanding operations in the operations web available. We talked about that at that time when we talked about business features and the operation web enhancements. Another synchronization editor enhancements, of course, this is the new way how you can configure quota variables. In the past, quota variables was just used as percentages, but referenced, I like to say, in a data frame from 0 to 1. Yeah, so 0.15 was 15%. It's a little bit like in spreadsheets, for example, Microsoft Excel, where the data behind the display is then, of course, something between 0 and 1. Now in the Identity Manager, we decided for quota variables to make it more handy for end users. That means you can now configure percentage values. That means if you want to add 15%, you have not to insert 0.15. You can just write 15 and that will be then the percentage value. This is a change in that case, as that the range is now different. Instead of 0 to 1, you have 0 to 100. Another synchronization editor enhancements, of course, is here to test the virtual schema properties. This was only possible, I like to say, in a type of switch. So you was just doing something, creating virtual schema properties in the mapping editor. Once that was done, then it was necessary to jump to the target system browser, and then in the target system browser you was testing that specific virtual property, figuring out if the values looks good, and if not, then you jumped back just to the mapping editor to do the next changes. This is now history, especially because in the mapping editor you can now as well test your virtual schema properties. More or less similar to what we discussed before, now you can test as well system or object filters. They can be defined. We remember there is the way on a scope just to define the system or object filters. However, it's not only possible to define them, it is now as well possible to test them. And in addition to the test, there is now as well a wonderful option that if you just look in the target system browser and you see several objects, you can now just click on that object class and see the filters and edit the filters if you like to. A little bit specific, and this is the third topic here on that slide, are these empty values. If a reference scope is empty, this will have the effect that you get all of these objects back. This is since synchronization editor exists. It's a standard behavior, but that could be a little bit odd, especially in situations where you just configured something wrong. And because of that, if such a null reference now exists, then you will automatically get a warning that says your reference scope returns no objects, and because of that you get all of them. To handle errors in the Identity Manager is always something that needs to be seen in a synchronization. During the synchronization, at the end there could be errors, and up to today, there is the default handling implemented. The default handling is that if something is going wrong during the synchronization, that step will be repeated. And as it is now configured 2 times, that means you have 3 tries. The first try that fails, then the first repeat happens. If that fails again, a second repeat happens, and then during the synchronization you get a log error message that says there's something going wrong, and the synchronization continues. However, very often just customer told us they want to configure that on their own for their specific synchronization projects. Because they have per project specific ideas, how many repeats, if there are repeats or if there are no repeats or whatever. This is now all possible. Therefore exists now this manually capability on the synchronization project just to configure that. You can see that on in the screenshot directly below the red box. There is now, of course, the configuration. Same on the synchronization projects for the configurable concurrency conflict detection. And the first question to everybody is, of course, what the hell is this? What we are talking about are the problem that during a synchronization, there could be data changes just manually by synchronization processes or something else on these objects currently in sync. And of course, there is a concurrency conflict detection. This exists, and here's the same thing. In the past, we had a default. The default is more or less like we check that before we start processing. And the cache retention time is around 60 minutes. However, now on the synchronization project, you can have a configuration of these options. You see there's as well a big tooltip that explains exactly what you can configure before processing, before committing, multiple, and so on. This is all possible, and you can as well configure or fine-tune the retention time. Again, for all of these things, always important, if you don't have a need to change that for some reason, then you should go with the default values, which typically are a good default for the majority of systems. A little bit more tweaking here on the rogue detection, especially on multi-value properties or MVPs. This multi-value properties are properties where a number of values exists, a number of different values exists. And there was sometimes during the synchronization a little bit of problem because typically a change was detected, especially on lists, which was not changed. What's behind that? Sometimes in the identity manager, you have a specific type of values. And if you synchronize these values into a target system, there could be something like that the system is doing some, I like to say, uppercase configurations or lowercase configurations. That means the writing of the same terms are different in case of, I like to say, the cases, upper cases, lower cases. And this will then at the end lead, if on the next synchronization run, both multi-value properties will be compared, will then detect a change that has to do with sort orders. Smaller characters or lower characters do have another sort order than upper characters. However, the list looks then, if you sort the list different, and because of that, you see the rogue detection will happen and will outline there is a change, and because of that, equal properties will synchronized again, and the problem here is it will synchronize every time because of, for example, different handling in different systems. Because of that, it is now possible to configure that. So if we look at that rogue detection here, you see now there is a box, and this box allows the significance order in multi-value properties, and if you check or uncheck that, you will have it or you will not have it. And then we talk about the remote connection plugin, of course. What is the remote connection plugin? Please remember, job services very often are installed on target system machines. Sometimes they are not, and they are doing the job remotely because of some reasons. For example, you can't use target system machines, or you need a specific software set installed on target system machines. However, therefore exists this remote connection plugin, allows just, for example, from the synchronization editor to connect a service that will do then the job for this synchronization editor, because on the workstation there is not installed or configurable what you need. In this cases, it was always nice to do so, but I like to say simplify the installation, or for example, have a little bit better security implemented. It was necessary as well to add a secret to the configuration. It is then stored in the job service config on the server service side, and with that you are more secure. And to make it happen, in the GUI, it is now possible to add these values as well. Same thing, by the way, it's not only implemented in the synchronization editor, even the synchronization editor client, that means the command shell tool, does have that option implemented. And some minor enhancements as well for the synchronization. First, the enhanced performance. This is pretty nice, and that happens all the time from release to release, that there are some customer messages, and we then try to make things faster depending on data situations customer can send us. However, this happens again, this time for creating display values during the synchronization. We improved also the error handling for connectors using the local cache. That's another performance issue. New consistency checks that warns about configuration errors on mapping to M2all tables. This is quite nice, especially because then configuration problems are better outlined during the consistency check, and with that they can be handled before that project gets simulated or tested. And then some other performance enhancements, again, this time for custom target system user accounts. Creating, changing, as you can see it there, and deleting of user accounts was just causing some more calculation processes as necessary. Calculation processes are these SQL calculation processes in the database, which needs to be calculated. It's the database queue I'm talking about. However, we figured out that we can drop some of them, because especially if they are not necessary, and with that we speed up the complete process. Another very nice thing here on synchronization projects are that in the meantime, on the overview form, that is the Hyperview, or you can see it on the left-hand side, what we call the Hyperview at one identity, that there are in the meantime more detailed information about inheritable system entitlements, or the availability of these entitlement objects. What's meant behind that? It could be that some of the assigned entitlements are not suitable to a specific object. They are not assignable. And if that is the case, then they get outlined. You see that typically targets then stuff from Entra ID, Google Workspace, SharePoint, and so on. First, enhancements of the configuration library that is targeting value templates. There is one recurring problem in the identity manager from a fast configuration perspective, and this is targeting value templates which are calculating specific information, like, for example, the central account name, or a default email address, or an internal name of users. These things are typically calculated in a very specific way, and unfortunately this is typically not the way a specific customer is using. Reason for that is quite easy. Every customer is doing it differently. And to make that a little bit easier to use, we have now for these value templates not only the option to use the default or create something custom. Additionally to that, you can now select out of a bunch of templates which implement a different behavior. So you have not one script for creating a central account or an internal name. You have now some of them. and there are some customer rules more or less implemented, and you can select from them. With that, you will then always get another code segment, which will allow you at the end to do things differently. Of course, if the templates are not fitting to your needs because your company is doing different, then it's quite easy just to do the customization as before. Therefore exists, by the way, a new table that is called QBM config library and QBM config library category. And this new table allows now templating for a lot of these code segment parts. And you will find in the future much more of these fast configuration switches which allow you to choose from a template. The whole thing, if you are interested, looks then a little bit like you can see it here on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, you see that wonderful new form here, and that wonderful new form looks a bit, for the people who are informed about the synchronization editor, like a template form we use in the synchronization editor just to ensure that people can select synchronization templates. In this case, something completely different. We are talking here about value templates, but the way to use them is exactly the same. Now let's talk about some miscellaneous enhancements as well. Again, enhanced performance, this time for viewing conditions in different application roles. They was just streamlined so that they works a little bit faster. We have optimized calculation for permitted approvers. There it was necessary just as well to, I like to say, streamline some SQL so that it's now easier and faster to get these messages. We have implemented better error messages, especially if on saving an error occurred. Remember, there is always that big window where you can, with the help of checkboxes, add more and more information in there. Then you get a very detailed .NET error log where everything stands in, but it is a little bit odd sometimes to find the important information, and to ease the life of support, table name of base objects and display name and such are now part of the story and easier to find. Last but not least, no process delivery if there are custom database triggers that are disabled. This is a little bit a change to other stuff. If triggers are disabled, typically they are now in 9.2 not touched any longer. That means they are not used. That could cause a problem for people who are using disabled triggers by default. In this case, they have to change their code in a way that the right configuration parameter is used or not. And then we are looking at a new file component. This time we are looking at processes. There are components to get executed by process step. One of these sets of tools is the file component. And this file component has a new member, which is called modify file access.net. The difference to the old one, modify file access universal, is that this thing much better is able just to edit at the same time more than one permission. And that is very helpful to get that whole thing not only implemented, just used. We changed all modify file access universal tasks that exists in the identity manager and replaced it by that new component. Doing so, this was leading to two effects. One effect, of course, is that the set of configuration parameters talking about everyone are not used any longer. They are now removed from the way how that whole thing works. And this is important as well, together with that, this problem of revoking the everyone group from specific directories like the home directory, the profile directory, or something else will not happen any longer. That means if you now create homes or you create profiles, you have to ensure that your mother directory is not just inheriting this everyone group or such, because if that is the case, then you will have this group permitted on the whole file structure, which could be a security breach. Yeah, so please ensure if you create now with the new component, with the new editing component here, if you create now permissions, ensure that the parent permissions are okay, or of course that the inheritance is turned off for subdirectories. And something new on the PowerShell component .NET 4, there was an advanced login mode implemented when you run the PowerShell scripts, of course. And together with that, there is now a way how login at the end happens from an order perspective. Let me say it that way. The idea behind that is the following. In the past, it was the case that if PowerShell was just writing log messages to nlog, then automatically file log operations was not possible any longer. Now it is at the end configurable. You can configure what happens. The default is that stuff gets written to nlog. This is what we typically prefer. But there are no file operations, but you can as well switch then the option if you like to native. And then you will have no nlog, but you will get all the PowerShell messaging to the console, or as it is if you run PowerShell in the console window. And there we start with the script editor and the testing of script. And the first thing here is our enhancements on the script editor side. In the script editor, the first thing is that testing scripts was improved just by a better preset that was just which now exists. Additionally to that, the performance of autocompletion was increased. That is now working much faster. And if we look at that auto-completion handling, then there are now more options helping with that. Additionally to the single tap, there is the enter, of course, and the double click in the selection box just to get code inserted. Another change happened to job queue info enhancements. You can see that here. First of all, suspended job servers are now more visible. Therefore, now exists overlay icons and tooltips so that in the list you can easily see if a job server is suspended or not. You can see it directly here. And additionally to that, there is the emergency stop, which was completely overworked. It's now easier to handle. It works immediately. You hit one button, the system turns off. But if you reactivate then the queue processing, you will get the selection box where you can decide what at the end should be stored. Secondly, if we look at the job queue info again, there is one thing more which will help a lot of people, I guess. In the past, if you was interested in error messages, it was necessary to use tooltips or to copy out of the parameter box the message entry or something like that. This is now history. It is now possible on an on-error job, just use the context menu and get the error message directly displayed by using the context menu. Job server enhancements. First of all, it is now possible to see nlog messages on a job server log as well. This is not a replacement. There is the standard log message like it was before, but additionally an nlog tab exists where you can just look into that, and then as you see it here in the preview, you can, for example, look into the database messages or something similar. On the application server side, some minor enhancements. First of all, it is now possible to see the product version and the software revision directly in the overview page of the application server. This is something support will make happy, I guess. The application server installer CMD will now be installed as well. This is the standard behavior for all of these command line tools. In the past, only the app server installer was not installed. This is now gone away. It is now there like all the other CLI tools. Together with that, it is now as well possible to edit an existing application server. This is very nice. Remember in the past when you just forgot, for example, to add the search plugin or so to your application server, it was necessary just to remove the application server from the installation and to reinstall the application server to the installation. And in the second install then to select the right plugin and configure it. However, now it's possible to do an edit so that at the end a new installation is not necessary any longer. In any case, if there is any reason to deny a session certificate or something else, this was something you have to figure out with, I like to say, browser development tools. Now it is logged to nlog. That is as well something really helpful. Quantum Migrator CMD exe is as well modified. What the hell is that? This is the installation or upgrade tool command line based. Remember, if you want to install or to upgrade the Identity Manager installation after you have installed the tools on your admin workstation, then the configuration wizard is started. The command line version of that is the Quantum Migrator CMD, and this is now a little bit extended in functionality in a way that it can do something what the GUI since ever can do, and this is you can use that command line tool to create custom permission groups. Remember, the wizard is always asking for edit permissions or viewing permissions or edit roles and view roles and something else. This is now possible to be done with the command line tool as well. Additionally to that, optional parameters for PostSQL commands exist. That means you can now, after the database installation, to run specific SQL commands if you like to, by just referencing a SQL file. Software loader enhancements. That is a little bit hard to discuss, but I will try it. Typically, all the files stored in the database for the auto update needs specific path information. Think about Angular, for example, or some other tools where in some bin directories or so some files have to reside, and these base directories needs to be configured in the database. What happens now sometimes is that people are not really careful. They just, I like to say, select a folder where some files are in, and if they do so, then the correct files will be written into the wrong base object. That at the end will then lead to no changes because the system cannot really find these files. What typically was done in the past is that people just generate the file structure, the base file structure, in that root directory where the resources are, and with that the right base directories will be as well written into the database. This is the way to do it. Unfortunately, the problem was that nobody was telling people that there is something wrong. This is now different. You can see here this wonderful yellow error messages. There is just now this error message here, and this error message here just let people know if there is a known file in the wrong base directory, or it's going to get stored into the wrong base directory, then the system will tell you that there is something wrong and you might have a second look on it. Again, the solution then will be to put that thing into the right subfolder structure. Schema extension enhancements exists here as well. Custom columns in view tables can be deleted. What's meant behind that? It is not possible in the schema extender at all to delete data. That means if you go into a table and say this column, I don't need that any longer, please delete it from the schema, this will not be possible. But what is possible since 9.2 is now that you can go into view tables. Remember, view tables are specific views on really hard-coded tables. Base tree, for example, is a really hard-coded table. And org, for example, it's a view on that specific table. And it is possible with the new schema extender in 9.2 now in the org table, that means in such a view table, to delete a column if you don't like them to see there anymore. But again, there is no data loss at all because the real data, it's written in base tree and it's not possible to delete a column in base tree. If we look at that, first of all, there are some new Launchpad enhancements in a way of that there are new tasks in the Launchpad, for example, to show directly deferred operations or change management or check data consistency, or for example, to export data. What you know there is that if you just use such a button, in this case, for example, mainly the manager gets opened and then with a deep link, something will directly jump to that position where you can define such specific subtasks. Additionally to that exists some more program functions. Program functions are just functions could be added to the security of the identity manager to make it possible that some people at the end are allowed to do specific things in front ends or not, and easily to say there is a new one for database export, consistency check, and manage tags. That is now an additional permission you can have or not. Another very nice feature I like to say is that customized translations are now highlighted. The problem here is that pretty often if you look into a list or in the designer or something else, there are translations inserted, but it is not quite clear if this translation is there because it is out of the box implemented or it is there because somebody was adding it customly. Now with the new feature, this is the highlight feature, it's much easier. You can easily see in translation editors, like they are implemented in the manager or on the object browser, left side of the screenshots. There is now a highlight that says this is custom translation, and as well in the designer, where you have more that table-based view, you see now with the highlighting as well your custom translations. Another interesting feature, it's referring to all of these specific strings which outline so-named full paths. Full paths are typically of interest if you have a hierarchical structure. The full path then shows from the begin of the structure on all elements down to the elements you're looking at. These full path exists in roles and departments, profit centers and such. However, they can be translated as well, and therefore exists now the capability. A couple of modifications happens as well to mail notifications. This is the first one. Email notifications will not longer be sent to permanently inactive identities. That means in the past, it was not really a difference if if an identity was, I like to say, activated or deactivated. In any case, an email was sent out, and that was then leading to some problems just with error messages or mail demons just on deactivated accounts. Now the identity manager takes care of that, and permanently inactive identities will not get any longer emails. Therefore, a lot of generation conditions in mail sending processes was necessary to be modified, and that means if you have such mail sending jobs as well implemented in your implementations as custom mail sending jobs, you have to have a look at these conditions as well. Additionally to that, if we talk about these processes just generating emails, there are some more log on error messages implemented now. You will now get notified during the process generation if relevant configuration parameters are not set, for example, or the valid email address is not entered. Second slide for mail notification enhancements. This time we are talking about scripts for formatting links and emails. Remember, these links then could cause data actions. We had some out of the box existing email templates doing so. They are now moved from, I like to say, the old object layer to a more modern object layer. This affects mainly the scripts you can see there. Build IT shop links, build attestation links, build compliance links. Again, there is the hint, please ensure that if your custom scripts are using these specific functions, that the call of these scripts are of course corrected. And slide number 3 for mail notification changes. And this is something a lot of consultants will make really happy during the installation process of the Identity Manager. In the same way then as task in the Launchpad, it is now possible to set an SMTP server directly. One more, just targeting mainly the manager. Remember, in the manager of the Identity Manager, there is always the task section, and the task section is at the end depending on the base object that is selected. Then you will see a couple of tasks, but it is as well possible that some of these tasks are depending on a specific status of the object. For example, not in the editor part, it's only in the overview part, or vice versa and such. However, There is a new UX enhancement there that tasks are only shown in the task list if the status of the object, whatever it is, of course, allow to use that task. What is the difference? The difference is in the past you hit a task and it was possible that something came back and say it is not possible because XYZ. And the new behavior is that the task is not available if it is not possible to use the task. And at the end, really miscellaneous enhancements here to the full text search. This full text search is now able to look as well into integer columns, which was not possible before.